like that intro.
I did too. I like that intro. That
Yeah.
was good.
Well, you must have dug to find that picture of me and the alien in the night.
Good job. Good job. She lost her voice. Jen, there you go.
Good evening and welcome to Chasing Prophecy on the UPR Radio Network, FM 105.3 in New Orleans, where we discuss anything and everything beyond the scope of normal. I'm Jennie Nicasio, along with my co-host, Shawn Kelly. Jason Iapetro is not here, and the fabulous John Ventry is again here joining us.
Hi,
Thank
John.
you guys for
Hi,
being
John.
here.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you all. I hope everybody had a great and fantastic weekend. I know I did.
Hey, at this angle, does my forearms look like Popeye?
Yeah, they do.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's got competition here.
My weekend was okay. I worked.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, everything's all right, and just
I went.
same as usual.
That's good.
I told you guys that a lightning strike near my house, right, blew my projector.
Oh no!
Home theater, yeah. So they finally repair it, send it to Sony. It took a month, and then he hooks everything up, and the receiver's not working. So I had to run out and get a new receiver. I tell you, I got no luck with electronics.
How long ago was that, John?
It was about 5 weeks ago that it.
Okay, and I believe that Mercury was in retrograde too at the time.
Yeah,
they said we just got out of it. Is that right?
October 2nd.
Wow. Well, I had a fabulous weekend. I spent the weekend with my grandson and his family, and that's why I got my new hat. So I got 2 new hats. So I'm excited. Yeah, it was a fun weekend. But getting back to some weird stuff, I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of weird stuff going out there in the atmosphere. And I don't know if it has something to do with Mercury retrograde or just that we're entering a new fall with a lot of weird stuff that maybe there's some portals or dimensions that are opened up. But we're going to talk a lot about some interesting UFO stuff with some former Mufon investigators. So, John, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guests for us tonight?
Yeah, our guests are Fred and Kathi Lane, who I met, probably 10, if not 11 years ago. They joined MUFON and they became field investigators for me out of Erie. That's where they live, up in Erie, PA. And Fred went on to become a state section director for the area. And they were part of the abduction research team for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And then they left that maybe 2 years ago. So real interesting people. And, I just ran up there and I went to a baseball game about a month ago. So they met me at the stadium up there, the Erie Seawolves. And they made it actually to the championship for AA. So it was cool. So I got friends all over the country, all over the world. I went to Scotland and I had a 4-hour lunch with the editor of Phenomenon magazine because I write articles for them. So, yeah, it's cool. This field has, I was thinking about that the other day because my son's trying to move to St. Louis to be near his sister, and I'll probably follow. And I say, I really got a lot of friends in Pennsylvania, whether it's politically or paranormally.
So you're going to move to St. Louis?
I think eventually I will, but not now. Not now.
And both your children live there. Yeah, we'll miss you.
Well, 4 grandkids will be there. When you think about selling your house, it's cheaper to just go fly and see them. Between what you pay the real estate, the moving van, you might as well stay where you are and just fly.
So where are they near in St. Louis?
St. Charles, which is right the county right next to St. Louis. It would be like living in Monroeville. That's how close you'd be. They're 20 miles. They're 20 miles from St. Louis.
Ain't bad.
So, but it's a real Bible Belt area. Even more so than here. The Midwest is different than anywhere else. I mean, those 7, 8 states, they're very honest, religious people, and in a lot of ways, kind of naive. But that's okay.
Naive. Okay.
I think they are. They're not exposed to a lot. Not like me. I grew up in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens. It's like
New York is really turning into Gotham City.
It is. I was an adult at like 8 years old, 9 years old. I think I could have ran a business at 12. You know. So, all right, let's bring friend Kathi on.
Okay. Welcome to Chasing Prophecy.
Hey, Kathleen. Night, Fred.
How you doing?
Hello. I'd like to say a couple things about John. Okay.
Yes, please.
When he first came up to Erie, and we went to a ball game, and because he was trying to decide whether or not he wanted to do a concert
Jesus. I know it's.
We were walking back up from the stadium, and I said, John, we're going to give at least $1,000 to charity out of this conference. He never batted an eye. And it was okay. And we raised almost $12,000 for charities here with these conferences. And the other thing I want to say is, John, thinking about you in kilts, it's disturbing at best.
I thought when you said up in Erie in a ball game, I thought you were going to say you had me throw out the first pitch and I threw it. I didn't throw a strike. I threw a one hopper to the catcher to his right.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to mention that, John, but as long as you did, it was terrible.
Now it's out there.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, in the news, I just saw a flash on the side of my computer. Did Loretta Lynn pass away?
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just saw it. I see another little news flash here. Brad Pitt choked one of his kids.
What?
Wow.
Well, didn't kill him, but I guess he got angry. It kind of shook him a little bit.
Did you hear about Aaron Judge? He hit 62 tonight.
Oh, he did.
Did he really?
Okay,
Good.
Good.
So.
Hey, before we get into your background, let me tell you this, Fred. I was on the phone today with a former Mufon board member. Okay, and I think you probably recognized the person when I was on their board 10 years ago. And so we're talking, and out of his mouth comes, and it was kind of unexpected. He said, John, this whole UFO field is demonic. You were right when you started saying that back in 2015. I just telling you, I know, and we'll get into this a little bit because Fred and I are on polar opposites of the religious and God question. But this is another person that has switched sides, and you talk about a MUFON board member, and not anymore. He's not on the board anymore. But
you're not supposed to be smoking that stuff, John.
Well, you know what? You know what happened, Fred? I think he got exposed to some things, real bad luck and different things, and it really opened his eyes to how so many people. We've talked about and done episodes on the number of people in the UFO field that passed away prematurely, right? And there's a number of people that just run into the worst luck, different things happen, beyond their control. And, and something like that, I think is what happened to this person. And he said, John, it's just, to me, there's a huge demonic influence in it. But the second thing I want to bring up to you is, do you follow at all the congressional hearings on UFOs and that Lou Elizondo and, talking, how they've created this new group that's going to be in charge of, investigating UAPs?
Yeah. Well, let me say this about that, John. The CIA, they don't let stuff like that out unless they have a reason for it.
Well, I agree.
And I'm wondering whether or not what the Sumerians said about the Anunnaki, because they said they would be back.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they're trying to indoctrinate people so that, when they show up, they don't freak out.
Or there's some huge false flag thing coming, and the government's going to use the UFO thing as superior beings are saying this or telling us this. Whether we actually ever see them or not, that might be, another deal. But let me tell you, the point I wanted to make was that who Lou Elizondo is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. 3 weeks ago, he does an interview, and the title of it is Lou Elizondo wants to blow up ufology. And then you read the article, he says he wants to kill the UFO field, which is something I heard about 3-4 years ago when they came out with that whole Academy to the Stars and TTS and all of that stuff, where they're taking over the field right? So he says that there is we're not qualified. He didn't say MUFON, but he's saying the groups out there and the people out there are not qualified. This should be done by government scientists, and like Blue Book, let's say. It should be a Blue Book thing with no private groups or individuals out there involved in ufology. I mean, how is that for like a communist version of UFO of ufology where they control it? Well, think about it, Fred. They're going to control the narrative and the investigations and the proof, and we're not allowed to. Like, I live in a free country, I think.
Well, John, they've said for years that they haven't been. I've got a shirt that says doing the Air Force's job since 1969.
Yeah.
They've been saying, oh, no, we aren't interested in this. And yet there's Elizondo coming out and saying, yeah, there was a program, ATIP, and it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
So, anything that's coming into our airspace, believe me, they're not ignoring them.
Well,
and they would like to get their hands on such. Another thing, John, I was talking with Nick Redfern a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the triangles that are people seeing.
Yeah.
I said, it's amazing. I said, I'm wondering if the triangles are something that we back engineered from UFO crashes. And we're actually flying them.
Well, you remember the Bucks County case, right? Remember Denise with the metallic sprinkles in the tree? Mm-hmm. It was on television a couple of different times with her and I. I'm convinced at this point that that's the TR-3B. It was a triangular craft with a light on the three corners and a different colored large one in the middle. And, at the time, I didn't know that in 2008, but maybe in 2013, I discovered the Aurora project, and TR-3B matched right up with it. But that would be ours. That's a government.
Well, didn't the Air Force go to and ask MUFON to do their investigations? That's what I thought in the beginning it was. Was it the STAR team?
Well, that was in 2008, maybe 2009 into 10. Harry Reid got funding from the Defense Department and funneled it through Robert Bigelow into MUFON. It was a couple of $1 million, and he gave $800,000 to MUFON to pay for our expenses to go out and stay in a hotel, rent a car, and do investigations. Yeah.
Well, I think Elizondo was wrong about blowing up the MUFON and that, because the more eyes you have on the sky, the better off you are.
Well, I agree, but they're thinking of government control. Well, they don't want protesters. They don't want a dissenting opinion on anybody else looking into this. And I was talking to that board member, and he said to me he was watching those congressional hearings on the UAPs a couple of weeks ago, and he said a Navy person said, the people and organizations that investigate this and make up stories, they should be prosecuted. So who do you think they're targeting? Who do you think they're going to target? It's going to be MUFON and the investigators. And I tell you who they should go after first, and I'm not in favor of them going after anybody, is this whole ancient alien thing. If you want to target a group that's making up stuff, it's the whole ancient alien group. But they shouldn't be targeting anybody because we live in a free country.
John, I totally disagree with you. And I don't know if you have read, I know you have, I'm not sure if the other two people here have read Zecharia Sitchin's Genesis Revisited. When you do, you realize that the book of Genesis is a retelling of an ancient Sumerian tale where beings came here, they needed primitive workers, and they're discussing it. And one of the what they believe was a scientist said, the creature you named already exists. All we have to do is bind upon it our image. Remember, the Bible said, God said, let us make man in our image.
Yeah.
The reason it's plural is because it's taken from this story. And it goes in great detail about how he makes a clay vessel. Remember, God drew in the clay? He makes a clay vessel. He puts the egg and the seed into it, and he puts it into the house where life is breathed in. Remember, God breathed life into the clay? Mm-hmm. And then he takes it out, he inserts it into his wife's womb, and 10 months later, the birth goddesses come and deliver the child. And she holds it up and he says, what do you call the creature? She says, this is not a creature, it's a sentient being. And we should call him Adamu, A-D-M-U, first man. And later on, he takes the woman that he creates and he puts them both into the Garden of Eden. And when he's walking through one day, he sees them and he wants to know why she's not pregnant. He says, your brother Enlil, who's the military commander of the expedition, didn't want that. And this guy by the name was Enki. He goes and he tells him about childbirth. Well, he had several nicknames. One was he who knows oil and the other was he who knows water. But the third nickname he had was the serpent. And there's the talking snake in the garden. There is no devil. There is no God. This is what they were talking about. And as you go through the Bible where they're talking about, oh, God said this. No, he didn't. Look at what's his name? Ezekiel. One of the NASA scientists, the engineers who designed the landing gear for Apollo, went to see Eric Von Daniken talk about this. And he decided he was going to prove Van Daniken wrong because he was a Christian. So he works and he builds what he thinks Ezekiel saw. He gets a patent on it. It would fly. And unknown to him, an Austrian engineer, he took the second book because Ezekiel was told to build something, and he builds what he believes that Ezekiel was told to build. And the two of them get their models together, and the flying machine fits right into the thing that the Austrian built. So there you have a thing where this isn't God talking. This is somebody else. Somebody else.
You know, in the Mahabharata, there is a Vimana, which is the name of a craft.
That's
and
right.
There's a whole diagram of it, and they rebuilt it, and it flies. You know, and
are they using mercury, John? Because that's what at the bottom of the
that was
Vimana.
mentioned. Was mentioned in the Mahabharata as
right.
and solar panels. It's really an interesting read, and
it really is.
And how to avoid
it is an interesting read. Yes, it is.
How to avoid bird strikes when you're flying. You got to wonder how the hell how would they know that? You know.
Yeah. Well, John, look at the Baghdad battery. How would they possibly know that you can plate metal and with electricity? How would they even know about electricity?
I think why don't you explain to our audience what you're talking about, the Baghdad battery or whatever it is? Would you explain it to me and Shawn? We have never heard of that.
Yeah, we know. Fred and I know all about this stuff.
I know.
We're not explaining anything. Again.
Yeah. They have that stuff in books. Actually, the Baghdad battery is a
I can't see your
it's an earthenware jar about this big. Okay, and inside of it they would put wine or vinegar. Okay. Then they would put a metal core down in it, and it would produce electricity. And they would use that to plate some of their objects that they had.
They also think that
the question is, how would they know that?
How would they know that?
They also think that when you look at the pyramids, you know, once you go down one aisle, you know, and then turn and stuff, how'd they get the light in there, like to paint and draw everything? So they think the battery, and they actually invented a bulb also, you know, that was probably, they had to light it somehow, and there's no like soot marks, you know, from holding torches, and I don't even know if there'd be enough oxygen in there. And they, you know, they tested mirrors, and it really didn't work to refract it 3-4 times to get down. So, but here's the thing, you know, for every how did they do this, there's another answer. But you know, I think we were actually smarter back then than we are now. I think we're de-evolving. I'm not even joking about. I really believe that humans were smarter previously. They told us this 10,000 BC thing where we evolved from apes and we're getting smarter and smarter as we go along. I don't believe that. I think we were smarter then, you know, because I believe we were created. But even if we were genetically engineered, we were smarter then. And each generation, due to mutations and interbreeding, we're losing some of that intelligence. So that's how they invented some of these things. I think if we could meet somebody back then, they didn't have technology, I think they were very, very intelligent.
Well, you know what, John, you mentioned the pyramids, and where I worked, we had a lot of different engineering companies,
Mhm.
and 4 of them had Egyptian engineers. Okay. And so the job that I had, I was able to talk with them. So one time it was after Friday.
Egyptian? You speak Egyptian?
Yeah, they were Egyptian.
No, you speak Egyptian.
Do I speak Egyptian? No, I speak hieroglyphic. I'm
okay.
fluent in that.
So you created sign language.
Yeah. But anyway, we were talking, and I asked them, who built the pyramids?
Yeah.
And they said, we have no idea. It says it wasn't the Egyptians. He says,
Of course.
He says, one of the guy made a good point. He says, the ramps, right? He says, if you had a ramp that went up 1 foot for every 10, a very gradual slope, in order to pull a 70-ton block up 200 feet in the air, he said that ramp would be almost a mile long and composed of more material that's actually in the pyramids. Not only that, but because the very tip of the pyramid is directly, and I mean exactly directly above the base. The only way to do that is to have all sides of the pyramids visible at all times. And you can't do that if you have big ramps.
I agree. We didn't build that. And there's even
No,
mathematical.
And they weren't smarter, John. They weren't. Do you know about Göbekli Tepe? Do you people know about Göbekli Tepe?
I do.
No,
Yeah,
please explain to our audience.
It's 12,000 years old, and it was purposely buried. And I advise you to go and look at these things. These are huge pillars, and on these pillars are animals carved in relief on these pillars. And this is 12,000. We were hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago. And who would have? And these things are 20 feet tall. They're spread out over a square mile. Who had the technology to bury them at a height of 20 feet 12,000 years ago?
I might be getting that mixed up with Baalbek in Lebanon. What's Göbekli Tepe?
The temple of Baal.
Where's it located?
Göbekli Tepe is about 100 miles away from Mount Ararat.
Okay, so that's in the Middle East too.
Right, but Baalbek is in Lebanon. And
yeah, Lebanon. But Baalbek has that this carved block that's 1,200 tons. 1,200 tons. They even said we can't move that with cranes. And it also has on it, if you look at the platform, there's one in place already, and it's about 30 feet high placed, and it's on smaller blocks. How'd they get it up there? I mean, you're talking about some 1,200 tons. How did they? So I don't believe we built any of that, and that was a temple to some god or whatever.
Well, the only way they could be built, John, is if somebody was using something that was anti-gravity.
Well, I agree. I don't think they piled up sand.
So I don't think the ancient people had anti-gravity. I'm just saying.
No, of course they didn't. It was somebody from outer space came down. The Sumerian race they were, I believe, aliens. I mean, offsprings of some extraterrestrial out there.
Let me throw the alternative view in, and all those things that are said from Sumeria. Well, first of all, I spoke with Michael Heiser, who's a theologian. You might recognize the name, and I asked him about Sitchin, and he says other people that interpret Sumerian cuneiform writing does not see what Sitchin saw. That Sitchin was very liberal, a word you'll like, liberal in his interpretations.
I hate you, John.
Fred's a far left Dem. I'm a far right far. So we're gonna go at it tonight. No.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's funny. John and I are good friends, and we kid around on that. John, I wonder why the rest of the world can't be like that.
Well, yeah, I don't hold it against you.
I agree.
Oh no. No, I don't either, John. I know you pray for me, and I just go, oh, Jesus.
Well, I see I won. You said, oh, Jesus, I won.
Well, like I said, John, if the Old Testament isn't true, and it's not, because you see, they picked what books that they wanted in there to agree with their theology and with their philosophy.
So they had to get
because the book of Enoch is not in there, and yet Enoch was the father of Methuselah. And Methuselah was the father of Lamech. And Lamech was the father of Noah. And Noah.
Well, the book of Enoch, that was in the Old Testament.
Oh, he's only mentioned once. The whole book is not there. And
Yeah,
it's the only book where Enoch says, I did this, I saw this, I went here. And he talks about beings called the Watchers.
Yeah, the Watchers, they're the evil guys, the demons.
They were the ones that mated with the women.
You know
what?
You know where in the Bible where it says that the angels were cast out of heaven, right? Try landing party. That's what they were.
You see,
they weren't evil. They weren't devils. They were a landing party.
So they're from a different
planet. And Lucifer was the general. I'm telling you.
That was the general.
You want to hear my theory?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we want to hear your theory, Shawn.
Yeah, you don't like it, but I'm going to say.
Yeah.
If you look at the Bible, right? I did a show on this on my other show, Into the Night. Lucifer's only mentioned one time in that Bible. One time. And that was from a prophet. Now, I believe that Lucifer was sent out of heaven to keep an eye on Satan that was in hell. That's my belief.
Do you know where the word heaven comes from?
No.
Where?
Well, the Nephilim, okay? Basically, that translates to those who came down from the sky. But when it's translated into the Arabic, they don't have a word for that. So they used heaven, and that's where it actually comes from. So they weren't coming down from heaven. They were coming down from a ship.
Yeah.
Let me say this.
And you got to remember, these people that are seeing them, they don't even have the wheel yet. And here people are coming down in these ships. And that's why when you see these carvings and these relief of the Anunnaki, they have wings. Well, they didn't really have wings.
Fred, Ezekiel
said, just like our pilots, they don't really have wings, but they have little wings on their shirts, and they can fly in aircraft. And that's the only way they could say that these people had the ability to fly. And by the way, Enki, he loved to travel. He loved to sail and travel. And he's
Pan-American. He flew.
And he's probably the one who went to South America because they call him Quetzalcoatl, right?
I agree. I think the
serpent. Remember, he was the serpent in the garden, and they call him the winged serpent. And if you look at these reliefs, they're all carrying these little bags, these little handbags. And it doesn't matter whether it's Europe or Africa or the Middle East or South America. All of them are shown holding these bags, just like our astronauts do when they're walking to the space, when they're walking to the rocket with their little portable units, life support units.
Oh, I thought they had Tang in those.
You know, yeah, you should.
So they invented Tang in
you know what, John, I talked to Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon. They hated Tang.
I used to drink Tang as a kid. You remember that back in the 60s?
Look at you now, John. You're younger than me, and I got all my hair, and you don't.
Yeah, but I'm in great shape.
Yeah. Well, hey, I had a stroke. Give me a break.
I know. Hey, but think about this. You talk about that story, Adamu, Adam. You had your first couple of generations there that you named. So now they tell the story, and it changes a little bit because they separated in 10 different directions, and this one calls him Adam, this one calls him Adamu. This says this, but the storyline is fairly similar. So the Sumerians told that story first, then it got to Israel, and they put it in the Old Testament, but it's still the same story, even if the wording is a little bit different. It's the same story.
Well, remember Genesis, oh my God, I can't think that he came from where he led the Jews out of
Moses?
Babylon,
Moses.
Not Moses. He guys right on there. Anyway, when he brings them back to the Promised Land, it's 50 years later that they write Genesis.
Okay.
And they can't remember the whole story, so they make up. They what they had, and that's why it seems so disjointed. That's why the sun is created before light. And it's because they couldn't remember the whole. I'm sure you all played the game Telephone.
Well, or God just created.
Somebody tells you a story, and then you have to tell it to the next person, the next person, the next person, and finally the last person relates the story. It has a little bit, a few words, a few ideas, but basically it's a different story.
Yeah, well, you look at
Lost in translation.
yeah, well, some of it is, but if you look at like India, and they've been their Mahabharata, etc., is 3,000 years written, but it goes back 5,000-6,000 years. So it's 2,000-3,000 years word of mouth, and then until they're able actually to write, and then you have a written account. So who knows how much of it changed over those years?
Yeah, exactly, John. That's exactly my point.
But the storyline is still basically the same.
And so, see, religion's a cult, John. Okay, drink my blood, eat my flesh. It's a cult, John. Jesus.
There's symbolism in that, and the occult takes the opposite of the religious side and turns it into something else. And it's always the opposite.
John, you always have to have a bad guy in the story. I mean, look at Moses when he goes up on the mountain, right? Yeah. And great fire and smoke descended on the mountain, and he was told to keep the people away. Why? Why would he be told?
He didn't want them to get burned.
Get burned, yeah, get burned from the ship's engines. And when he comes back down to give him the 10 Commandments, you remember what he looked like? His skin was pale and waxy, and his hair was white.
He looked like Shawn. He looked like Shawn Kelly when he came down from the mountain. He had a little longer hair.
Yeah. So,
Moses.
Yeah, but that was radiation poisoning, and that's why he was told he would not see the promised land.
Let me tell you something though. Van Daniken,
if he really wanted to talk to the Israelites, why didn't he appear in the sky as a giant talking head?
That would have scared the crap out of him. That would have scared me. It's the same way.
That's what religion does, John.
Right. It's the same way you think about Egypt, and they had their gods, those 8-foot tall human bodies with bird heads and animal heads. They brought them out. Those things were real. That is not some, crafting of rock. I mean, those things came out, and that's crowd control. You wonder why people stayed in slavery for 1,000 years, whatever they were. They brought those things out, and everybody just got down on their knees. What would you do? You saw an 8-foot guy with a jackal head or a bird head. That was crowd control is what it was. But let me tell you for a second about Van Daniken, right? My buddy Van Daniken, who I did the Ancient Alien Conference with in 2012. And I think I was one of the few people on the panel that weren't on the cast, But Van Daniken, and this is my interpretation too, he spent 3 years in prison for embezzlement, right? And when he was in prison, he wrote the second book of his line of books that he had. I believe the devil in that prison cell was whispering all this stuff in his ear about ancient aliens and all of that. It's almost like evolution, just another way to get people not to believe in creation. So if that don't work, with Darwin, we're going to tell people that there are aliens out there that created us. And that's what I believe with Van Daniken. I think that guy is demonically possessed, and I think that he created this story.
John,
as just another way not to believe in God.
I think your earphones are on too tight, John.
I dropped my earphone right at the start of the show, and the whole thing came apart, the wires and everything. I had to press it back in. So, but I'm sure. Wait, let's get back to the beginning. I wanted to ask you how you got started in this field.
Well, how we got started was when we moved into the house that I grew up in. My neighborhood is more inner city now, and these kids, the only thing they talked about was that they were either going to be in the NFL or the NBA. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I said to Kath, we got to do something. We got to change this. So what we did, we started what we called Wild Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. And what we would do is bring speakers in to talk to these kids up at the Lighthouse Park. And then we'd give them some books, that they could go and read and that. And then we started a library on our front porch. We had something like 300 books on our front porch. And once a week, the kids could come over and get a book. And if they couldn't read, we taught them how to read. Well, anyway, one of the guys we brought up was Robin Swope. And Swope was talking about UFOs, and I was telling him about seeing the object over the peninsula that back in '66. Mm-hmm. And he said, there's a conference going on down in Pittsburgh, and so he gave us the information, And that's when we came down and we saw you there. But where I actually really got interested in, I was in the 4th grade, Mrs. Gallagher, and they had a library. It was a Catholic school, but they had a library. And in the library, there was this UFO book. And I took it out and I read it, and I was just fascinated with it. So I checked it out the next week. And the next week after that, we were leaving for the summer, and I never returned it. So and somewhere I still have that book, and I believe I owe the Catholic Church about $75,000 in fees. I'm not sure.
Back fees. It's probably in your collection on the porch. But Shawn and Jen, he has these books there that the neighborhood kids can come and read, and his wife was a principal, and they've done a real good job with these. I don't call to me inner city kids. I grew up in Brooklyn, Bronx. Yeah. You don't have inner city kids, but it's similar. Underprivileged kids. Let's say.
The other thing we did too is we got a power lawnmower because we have boulevards on the street, and I showed the kids how to use them, gave them safety glasses and stuff, and those kids would cut the boulevards, and they would I bought these green shirts, and they would sweep the neighborhood and pick up every piece of paper and stuff, and they got to learn how to work and how to look up at the sky and not just Well, anyway, of the 8 kids that we started out with that grew up. All of them graduated from high school. 2 of them graduated with honors, and they all have jobs now.
Good. Yeah, I mean, you did a great job.
It's really nice.
And we changed the neighborhood, and we also started a little group because we had some problems. So the guy that lives next door to me is a black man, and the guy that lives across the street is Puerto Rican, and we started the 3 Amigos. And the very first thing we did was we noticed that there's an apartment building up a few houses up from us. And we noticed all these guys walking into the place, and they had license plates from Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi and Minnesota. And I said to Jermaine, I said, Jesus, what? I said, something's wrong here. Something's very wrong here. So I said, we need to keep our eye out. So we watched it. One day, undercover cop goes in. He comes out, and he drops his bag of cocaine. And we saw him. And we called the chief of police, and we said, listen, you've got exactly 48 hours to get that woman out of the building, or somebody's going to lose their freaking job. I didn't use freaking. And 24 hours later, she was gone. And I told the head of the guy who owned the building, I said, don't you ever put anybody like that in there again. I said, or I'm going to come visit you, and you will not like me when I'm angry.
Fred. Yeah.
And after that, we just kind of cleaned the neighborhood up, and then, like I said, Swope told me, and I went down and met you and convinced you to come up to Erie.
Yeah, I didn't read my first UFO book till I was 41.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had no interest
in that one to learn how to read, John.
Yeah, it took me that long because I was trying to read Sumerian tablets. That's why. But I had no interest in UFOs. I went to horror cons, Comic Cons. I collected famous monsters of Filmland, if you remember.
Oh, was a great magazine, wasn't it, John?
Yeah. I got I have issue 24 to 140. I still got them, but I had no interest in UFOs until I was 41 when I joined Mufon. So tell us about the Presque Island case and the conference we did.
Presque Isle, not Presque Island. It's not
Presque
an island.
It's a
Presque
RESQUE, Isle, ISLE, Presque Isle.
Oh, it's not called island. It's just island.
Not an island, no.
It's not like Manhattan. Well, Manhattan's not an island. I guess it is an island. Yeah, yes, Manhattan's an island because it's not connected to the Bronx or anything.
You tell them what happened.
Okay.
All right, tell us about Presque.
Okay, 1966. 4 people. Let me read them out. Read the names here. Douglas Tibbetts, Betty Kelm. Betty was 16 at the time. Anita Hafley and Gerald LaBelle. And they were out on the peninsula for the day, and it got to be, 6 o'clock or so. And they decided it was time to go. So they went out, got in their car, and the car gets stuck in the sand, and they can't get it out. So LaBelle gets out, and he starts to walk to the ranger station to try to get some help. And it's a long walk, and he's gone for a long time. Well, anyway, they see this object come down, and they see it. It's kind of hovering, and it's showing lights that are sweeping the ground, and it lands about 200-300 yards away from them, and they're kind of spooked. And the other guy, he gets out of the car. Tibbetts gets out of the car, and he starts to walk down on the beach, and he says, "Jesus, there's something there." And so they see the park rangers, or the Tibbetts walks. He finally gets to the station, and he tells them. They says, "Well, on our rounds, if they're still there," he says, "we'll stop." So when they stop, they tell him what's going on, and he and the troopers and the other guy go out onto the beach, and they're walking around and they're looking, and they see these impressions in the sand, these big triangular impressions. And if you know anything about sand, you got to be pretty heavy to leave indentations in sand.
Wasn't
Right.
there a gooey substance in those footprints?
Yeah, there was something on the ground. They picked it up and they never identified it. They never identified it.
The Air Force took it.
Yeah, the Air Force took it, because the Air Force hears about it and they show up. And then as they're out on the beach, the girls all of a sudden they see this creature, and it stands up. It's about 6'6", 6'7", big thing, and it starts walking towards the car. And it's walking towards the car, and it's looking at it. It starts to scratch the roof of the car. The one woman is absolutely hysterical. The other woman is scared to death, and they hear them screaming, and they rush back, and they tell them about this creature and what he did, and they see the scratches on the roof of the car. Anyway, they won't let him move the car. Then they want the car to stay there. And then there's the FBI came in. And
The next day,
go ahead, Kath.
the next day, the Air Force showed up and took samples of whatever the fluid was of some kind. They took it with them. They took the pictures, and they reported it to Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book.
And according to that, to the case is 10798 or something.
Yeah.
It's still classified as unresolved.
Yeah.
They never said that it was a hoax. They didn't say what it was.
But it was one of the first times that you had the Bigfoot creature, which what we're calling Bigfoot, we know what it was, along with a UFO sighting. And of course, in as years go by, those, John, yourself, those incidents of seeing the craft and then seeing one of these creatures got more and more frequent.
Yeah. Here's something interesting, Fred, is that was probably the first Bigfoot UFO case in Pennsylvania in 1966. There was another one in 1973. But Project Blue Book and the Air Force showed up, and it's documented and all of that. Now, let me ask you this. Kecksburg is considered the biggest PA case. Presque Island is number 2. Carbondale's number 3, right? Blue Book never showed up. It was the year before, December of 65. 8 months before. They never showed up for Kecksburg. Why do you think that was? It's not in Blue Book. They never showed up.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Because they were involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I think.
They were talking about the writing that was on that thing in Kecksburg, and I just was wondering whether or not it was Russian.
Well, Fred Saluga, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Well, Fred,
by the way.
He's actually doing a lot better. A couple of years ago, I thought he wasn't even going to make it. When he broke his he broke his hip and his arm. I mean, his breathing was so bad, but he's doing fine now. But he took a real good look at Kecksburg. He's convinced it's that Soviet Cosmos 96. I looked at it with that engineer, and it matched up to spy satellites that we were launching out of Johnson Island. And Stan Gordon, he doesn't really say it's alien, but he does, pretty much imply that it was an alien craft. But it seems odd that Blue Book never showed up for that one. There's no documentation. That tells me they know it was a satellite, whether it was Russian or ours, and they recovered it, and they had to get it out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and they were there pretty quickly, too, after it.
40 minutes. 40 minutes they were there.
Yeah, it didn't take
And
long.
in Erie, they didn't show up until the next day.
Yeah, and they, the park police or whatever were making casts. They were pouring that white stuff for casts,
Right.
and the Air Force guys took the casts. Right,
Right.
they tried to take all
Took
the film.
everything. Yeah.
They kicked sand into the prints to cover it all up. I mean, that was, I think it was actually the best case in Pennsylvania was Brescow, was the number one case. But you saw, didn't you see it? You were you
Yeah.
just sitting
Well,
you were outside? What was going
Yeah,
on?
back then you could walk around the neighborhood at all times of the night because nobody was, and people left their doors unlocked. I mean, it was a different time.
I know.
And I happened to go out for a walk. And it was around, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. And I walked down to the lighthouse because it's only 2 blocks away from me. And I walked up there and I saw this object over the peninsula, just about where Beach 6 would have been. And it was, I want to say like a dime held at arm's length. Okay. That's kind of what it looked like. It was reddish. And I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I hear jets, and I look up, and there's a couple jets up there, and they got about halfway there, and this thing just went boom, and it was gone, just like that. So it must have been whatever it was they saw out on the peninsula.
Yeah, and then in 2016, 6 years ago, we did the Erie conference up there, and we got how many of the witnesses were we able to get?
Two gentlemen. We got the 2 gentlemen. The women they lost track of themselves.
Yeah.
But Tibbetts and LaBelle both came into Erie and had that little roundtable discussion.
Yeah.
And their story hadn't varied.
Yeah.
They recounted exactly what they had told the park police and the state police, the Air Force.
And then we were able to find other people who came forward, right? Then more people came forward and said,
Right.
well, I saw it also,
Yeah, something like 8 people they had accurate record of seeing something at the same time.
It's interesting when you said they didn't change their story. In 2015, I went to Stan Gordon's Kecksburg 50th anniversary thing at the fire department, and they had about a dozen of them. They all got up and they told what they told. And I a couple of times I said, wait a second, that's a different story than what you told in Stan's video where it's all documented, because I watched it before I went to the 50th. I wanted to have everything fresh. And I these people were like 80 years old at this point, and they looked at me and their jaws dropped, and I just kind of dropped. I didn't want to embarrass them. I didn't want to criticize them. But there was twice that I raised my hand. I said, "Wait a minute, that's not what you said." Then I just left it alone.
Well, what they said at our conference in Erie matched up with the newspaper articles we could find about it and everything.
Yeah, I would say
if you're listening in the audience and you have a question for Fred and Kathleen, please post it in the questions in the comment.
John, would you like to hear about a couple other cases we had that are pretty interesting?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me start out with one. We were working on the experiencer team, and those are people who believe they've been abducted. Mm-hmm. We had this one woman, and she was talking, and she was kind of crying, and she had been abducted since she was, I think it was 12 years old. A young child. And finally, she was about 30, and she had just had it because she'd been abducted all this. So she found herself a house with a room that had no windows, and she could lock the door from the inside. And then she moved in, put some big heavy locks on the door, and everything was fine for about 2 weeks. And then one morning, she woke up on her kitchen floor wearing clothes that weren't hers, and the room was still locked from the inside.
Wow.
Yeah, and she was just so we had the ability to send her to a psychiatrist and to a support group that she could talk and maybe talk things out, and that's one of the more interesting things I thought. Kath, how about you?
From the experiencer, there were several, but to go along, I have to temper that though. Some of the people we were talking to, we got to be able to tell the difference of the ones that truly believed they were being abducted, and some that were just so far out there. The story just kept going on and on and on to add more to it.
Yeah.
It's like they were looking for the attention.
How many of your cases with the experiencer would you say they're just delusional.
Some of them.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
want to know how many.
Yeah, oh, geez.
Like, would you say percentage of the people who?
We, we talked to quite a few of
Do-
them.
does the word plethora have any?
A lot.
I would say more, higher majority.
70%.
Were 70% maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
the other 30 were truly believed. Now, we can't say whether they were true or not, but we believe that they truly believe this is what happened.
What about the people who seem to think they see a figure from the 40s that wears a blue like a suit, and his name is Val Thor? Do you think that is a real?
I'm not
Did
familiar
you
with
ever hear of Val Thor?
No.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that, John.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a story. We had somebody on a couple of weeks ago, and
Oh.
it's a story out of DC that he's from Venus, and he came with a couple of Venusians that look just like us. And they actually spent 3 years at the Pentagon with Eisenhower and Nixon. And there's a photo of him and those two other people at a Howard Menger's place. You know him; he was an abductee back then in New Jersey. So I don't particularly believe that story, but
And there's also Ashtar Command, and so many of these people think that they see.
that's the problem, Well, maybe that's why Lou Elizondo, when we started the show, said he's going to blow up ufology. And the Navy guy says anybody making up stories in this field should be prosecuted. Well, I don't think they should, because you're allowed to write sci-fi stories, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's part of the problem in the field, that somebody's get so,
Well, see, anytime we go
not
into
real.
a case, we go in as skeptics.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to. And we got a chance to, when we first got to be investigators, what we did was we found a couple of policemen that we could talk to. And we asked them, when you're talking to somebody and you're interviewing them for a case, how do you tell if they're lying? And he says, well, what we do, he says, is that we'll let them tell the story. And then at a certain point, one of us will say, now, could you go back a second and
Retell it.
and retell? And then if they can't, and if they have to go all the way back to the beginning and start the story all over again, we know they're probably lying.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, the other thing too, when I did a lot of these interviews with Mufon, you ask them what happened next, and all of a sudden it's like they got to think, and you could tell that they're making stuff up. How do you not know what happened next? You just had an alien in your living room, and you can't tell me what happened next. It's not true. They can't tell you what happened next. But any other cases that come to mind?
Yeah,
our first one.
Yeah, our first one that we had was a really interesting case out on the peninsula.
Right here in Erie.
Yeah, right here. And a guy was out on the peninsula fishing. He was right near the Perry Monument, and he was just got done, and he was putting his gear away, and he happened to look over, and he saw this orange triangle just hovering above the monument, about 500 feet.
Yeah, I
Like
think
that.
that's what he said.
And so he got in the truck and he went around this little bridge there, and he just went around and just went over there, and he's watching this thing as it starts to move. And he's watching it, and it starts heading out again towards the lake. And he noticed that the parking lot is full, but nobody's looking up. He's the only one, and he's trying to tell, but they're all looking at their phones, and they're not, and he's the only one who sees it. And he follows this thing until he can't follow it anymore. And he said it just disappeared out over the lake. And that's the first case that we had that we thought was a pretty credible case. He was a very credible witness.
Do you think that's telepathic, though, if he's the only one that sees it in a crowd of people? Do you think was it really there, or do you think it was just a telepathic thing put in his head? Because I think that happens a lot. They target people.
Well, we interviewed him, and he was very credible. He was very down
He drew
to
us a picture.
Well, I'm sure he believed it, yeah, but I'm just saying the craft was probably put in his head. I had also read, and looking at these abductions, that if you see a UFO, you had already been abducted at one point.
How about the high school kid that goes out to the end of his drive?
We had one that had missing time. He was from the county, close to where we live, and he was getting ready for his high school graduation. He was already, mom and dad were still getting ready. So he went out in the driveway. They live in the county, which is darker and more out in the country. And he's walking down the driveway, stops at the end of the driveway, looks up, and he says, it was a clear night, but all of a sudden he could see no stars or anything in the sky. What he saw, he described like mountains, but coming down from this thing that was blocking out the whole sky above him. And the next thing, it didn't do anything. It just sat there. Next thing, north, the driveway faced north. Next thing he knows, he's facing south, the house. He hears his parents yelling his name, looking for him. He's walking back. He says, what? They're yelling at him, where have you been? We've been looking for you. He says, I was at the foot of the driveway. And he says, we have been walking around the house and the yard and the driveway for 15 minutes, and you were nowhere. And so this child, well, a senior in high school, had 15 minutes of missing time.
You know, I had missing time about a month ago. I went outside. I just swear to
Oh,
God.
whiskey coma, John.
Was that
Oh, whiskey coma, John.
whiskey? I'm not a drinker, and you know that. But I went out to pull weeds, and it was like, next thing I know, it's an hour and 40 minutes late. I said, there's no way I was out here an hour and 40 minutes. First of all, my back
You probably
my
were.
back wouldn't have held up that long. But there's a question. Shawn, you want to read that question from Sebastian?
Yeah, Sebastian Moran wants to know if the panel think about the dog man. What do you think about the dog man and werewolves? Thank
Do you
you.
think they're real?
We haven't done enough investigation on him
Yeah.
to really have an accurate,
We haven't had anybody that's seen one in our, in the cases that we've covered.
right.
So that's,
But that creature in Presque Island was probably a Bigfoot or something, right?
that's
It
what
was
we were
some
thinking.
kind
Yeah,
of cryptid, right?
because there's no bears or anything out there. So
That's right. No bears up there.
We don't disbelieve that there are cryptids out there, so that would
Right.
fall into dogman and werewolves and that.
see, we try to concentrate on just the UFO part of
Right.
it and that, because otherwise, you can go down a rabbit hole real quick.
I heard Mufon at the last symposium. Steve Hudgens got up and said, "There's no more paranormal investigations, no more Bigfoot, none of that stuff. It's strictly nuts and bolts, flying saucers." Did you hear that?
No, we didn't hear that, but that's been our philosophy.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
concentrate on UFOs.
Yeah, and
I
not,
heard he.
not that the other stuff doesn't exist or is not out there. It's just that we choose to just concentrate on UFOs and what people are seeing. And
I heard he got a lot of pushback when he said that at the state directors meeting. And a lot of directors said, "We'll investigate whatever's reported," because there is a spot on the form that says entities, right?
Yeah, right.
So what are you going to do? Ignore it?
I have a question to ask. I want to know what your thoughts are, and I ask this to every UFO person that comes on our show. Why do you think the government is hiding a lot of this stuff from us, with the UFO and alien stuff?
Money.
Money.
Okay. Look, religion is used to control people. Okay. Can you imagine what happens if all of a sudden we discovered that Genesis isn't real, that they're the ones that jumped us ahead? They've been here all along. They've been watching. Can you imagine what happens to worldwide religion? It goes away. And along with that, the money and the control, and all of a sudden, people aren't going to be listening to the government much anymore.
Okay.
It's very, see, stuff. Knowledge is dangerous to a government. I don't care whether it's a democratic government or a fascist government. It doesn't matter. The truth is very dangerous to them.
Okay.
Right.
Does that
All right.
answer your question?
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah. Hey,
Thank you. Worked
you
years
know
on
how you're saying that what would happen if they thought that Genesis wasn't true? Why does it have to be untrue? Why does it have to mean, like, what makes you think that there can't be a connection between Genesis, the creation, and other universes out there that have other beings. Why can't it be this? Why can't there be that God created? Not only did he create the heavens and the earth and man, but why couldn't he have created other beings out there? I mean,
well, think about it for just think about it for a second, okay? We're less than a speck of dust in the universe, all right? And here's a being supposedly can just think things into existence. Then why would he get personally involved in the minutia, which is our daily lives? Why would he keep screwing with us? Okay, that doesn't make any sense.
who's screwing with us? God?
Well, yeah, if you believe that there's God, why did he pick this planet? We know that there's billions.
Well, God created the heavens and the earth. He, according to Genesis, there was 7 days. Okay, now this is my theory. Now I'm sure other people feel the same way about it. God created, supposedly, you don't want to believe it, but like God, Christians believe that God created man in his image. What if God created others that he wasn't perfected or he did not like, and he put them someplace else in the universe?
Why would
instead of destroying something that he created, because God Almighty, he made this and he didn't want to destroy something that he made. Why couldn't he have put these other intelligent beings in other parts of the universe, just like he put us here, but he didn't want to destroy them?
So did he go and get personally involved in their planets too? Because if so, he's been really busy. And if the being on the other planet is a green blob with 4 arms, is that what he looked like to them?
God doesn't get personally involved in human beings. He gave human beings the choice to do whatever they want with their lives.
Yeah.
Free will.
Yeah, but Fred, aren't you limiting God? I mean, if God is God, he can be involved with a trillion people.
I don't believe in God, John.
I know you don't. I pray for you.
So you're an atheist, or are you an agnostic? Which one are you?
Say that again.
Are you don't believe in God?
No.
So you an atheist, or you
an atheist?
Okay, so you're a total atheist. You don't believe in anything that. Okay, so you don't believe in a higher power. You just don't believe in anything. Like,
no, we don't.
What about the whole energy thing that, like the Far East and the metaphysical, that you die and the energy's recycled and you come back as somebody else? Do you believe in any of that, or do you think that when you die, it's over with, like a plant?
There you go, John.
That's what you believe.
When you die, you go into the ground and the plants eat you. Okay, that's it. And that's it, John.
You either become Soylent Green or fertilizer.
There you go.
So you don't believe in ghosts or paranormal, like afterlife?
I've had several experiences with ghosts.
Well, so what do you think ghosts are? If there isn't a heaven and earth, what do they just?
I don't know. I just don't know.
So, Fred, you've had paranormal experiences.
Yeah.
Right. Tell us about one.
I had a really good friend, and how am I going to explain?
Now he's a ghost. You killed him?
No. Well, yeah, Miller. Yeah, we had a friend, Miller Hicks, from up in St. Catharines, and we were staying up with him at his house because he had stayed with us when he was going to school down here. And one night, I'm in bed and I feel something tugging on the bed sheets at the bottom of the bed. And I rolled around and I moved, and then it was again. And I looked up, and there's an old lady standing there. Okay. And then she was gone. And so the next day I said to Miller, I said, "Hey, Miller," I said, "where'd you get this house then?" "Oh, it was an old couple," he said. And you're in the room that the husband was in, and he was kind of sickly in that. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, one day the wife went in and she was trying to wake him, and she was tugging on the bed sheets, but he'd already passed away. So whatever that was there, maybe was the ghost of the old woman. I don't know.
And we chose not to tell him the story.
Yeah, because Miller would have freaked right out. Boy, he would have just freaked right out. Another time, friend of mine, and she had she was married, but she had another good friend. and he passed away suddenly. And she was just heartbroken. And so I went down to the funeral and down in Meadville. And I've been down there a lot of times, know my way around really well. And so I paid my respects and I got in the car to drive home. And I'm driving, I'm thinking, where the hell am I? And all of a sudden I'm on Ellicott Road. Ellicott Road is where this guy lived. But doesn't occur to me then. And I open up the map and I'm trying to see where I am. And I pulled the map down. He's sitting in the seat next to me.
Wow.
He says, take care of her. I said, I'll do my best.
Yeah.
You know?
So Fred, to you, are we taking a break right now?
Yeah, we've taken
Yeah.
a commercial break. I want to thank Carnation Instant.
Breakfast.
John, breakfast essentials and making a wonderful product. But thank you, Carnation, for sponsoring this second hour of Chasing Prophecy. And follow us on YouTube, Facebook. And if you think you'd be a great guest for the show, definitely send us a message to Chasing Prophecy Radio, gmail.com, or direct message us on Facebook. And if you have a question for Fred or Kathleen or John or Shawn or myself, please put them in the comments.
So speaking of questions, right? Kathleen Wilson has two here.
Okay.
So first question is, what about the idea that God doesn't make mistakes? And her second one, meaning, why would he have liked something he created?
I think she meant what I said. I think she's commenting about what I said when God, that was just my philosophy that if maybe he created them and wasn't happy with them. So that's when he decided to make him in his own image, and he didn't want to destroy them, and he put them somewhere else in the universe. That's just my philosophy, and that's how I explain UFOs and aliens and all the other stuff, Kathleen.
Well, for me, if we're talking about this, I was raised Catholic all the way up to 12th grade. And then I got into recovery when I was 28 years old. And I've been sober for 31 years. And they tell us to find a higher power. And the only one I knew I didn't like because my life was in shambles. Okay, so I just came to the idea to where that there is something out there in the universe that has kept me sober every day for 31 years. You know, I can't say it's God. I can't say it's Jesus. I can't say nothing. There's something out there that's saving. So in PPS too, we have a saying, we will respect what you believe. Just please respect what I believe, you know? So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And one more thing, my son, he's a scientist today. And when he was growing up, he did church every Sunday with his mom. He was an older boy, the whole 9 yards. And then he got into the scientific field in college, and he just completely does not believe in God.
But 70% of the kids that go to college that were Christians no longer believe.
He said
they go to college.
He said he needs scientific proof that he exists. So, but, you know, I love him still. And if that's what he wants to believe and deal with, fine, that's cool. You know, I'm all right with it.
You know, the only question I got with God is, as I look at the world and things that happen, there almost is, you know, like yin and yang, a balance. It's almost like for every good thing that's done, there's a bad thing, you know, because I believe the devil's real. And, you know, that's the only thing I question is that does God have to allow, like if the good things happen, then somewhere else bad things have to happen. Does God have as much power as we believe, or is the devil almost equal? And it's always this give and take. You do this, I do this, you do this, I do this. I don't know. But, you know, God gave us free will. That's why slavery was wrong. That's why anytime they want to control what you think and say is wrong, you have free will. You're free people. And you know, things are allowed to happen because even Hitler, 6 million people, or 100, you know, probably 40 million people got killed in Europe. But from that, the world learns a lesson, right? To never do stuff like that again, you know. So I guess he allows things to happen. That's that's my view. I believe
Well,
in
it gives
God.
you free will, gives you choice to.
Well, see, he gives you choice, but they control circumstances that you're in. Like something happens, they made that happen, and then it's how you react to it is what they watch.
So basically, John, the government is pretending, or not pretending,
Want to
but
be God?
actually think that they are God or something like that.
Well, I think they want power. It's like then in New York City they said your kids don't belong to the parents; they belong to the state. Well, I don't think so. You know, I, I don't think so. But I want to get back to Fred. Fred, you had two ghostly encounters, right?
Yeah.
So, do you believe in other dimensions? I mean, they had to come from somewhere. Where do you think these
No,
things came from?
I just read something about a year ago where researchers and scientists and physicists and I believe there's actually 5 separate dimensions. Okay. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I just don't know. There just isn't enough evidence to prove it, and whether or not we can slip in and out of a dimension, John, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I don't think the research that they've done so far just inconclusive to me.
I believe more in the interdimensional than I believe in extraterrestrial. Let me. I'm gonna lead you a little bit, Fred. Here. So you said you believe that there's many planets that are inhabited, and there's who knows. I don't want to say you didn't say trillions of people, but there's all kinds of civilizations out there, right?
Right.
Okay. So let me ask you this: all the UFO stories, and they're here for abductions, for this and that. Why don't they just go to a planet closer to theirs and do that? Why?
Maybe,
And because they said there's so many different races have come here.
maybe they have, John.
So they go to every single planet to harvest whatever's there?
Maybe. Don't know.
How many countries have you been to, John, in your travels?
Yeah.
Countries, probably about 30.
Well,
No. There you go, John.
maybe this ship that comes next maybe traveled to 30 planets.
Yeah, but
They have the technology to do it. We don't have the technology.
if they do, but if they, like people say they want resources, they come here. Well, I don't go to Italy to get spaghetti. I just go to Giant Eagle. I go where it's closest. I'm not gonna. What do I got to? I want to go there.
You know what, John? I agree with you because if you want material and stuff, you could just take any asteroid.
Right. You can mine it. The only thing
So,
that would be special here is our DNA.
The reason
right?
There's something else, and if maybe they're the ones that pushed us ahead, they might want to keep an eye on us just to see because they keep abducting people. We know they're taking blood and they're taking samples, so it's very possible that they're looking to see whether or not we've advanced to the point where they can interbreed with us. I mean, John, look at the cow mutilations. There's been something like 30,000 of them in the last since the 70s, and not one person has ever been arrested.
Right.
And when you find these cows, there's no blood.
Yeah.
There's the cuts and the things that are removed are precision.
Yep.
Precision, John.
But there's black helicopters, so that tells you the military's involved with that.
A lot of people think that it is our own people that are doing the abductions and the cow mutilations. They think it's someone they're using it for research.
I forget which show I was watching, and they had a veterinarian who performed surgeries and they had a dead cow, and they asked her to do what they do, and she couldn't do it. She just could not do it. She said, I don't understand how they can make these cuts so precision, and there's no blood. She said there should be blood everywhere.
Right.
But she said there is none.
Well, it's done somewhere else and they're dropped off,
Yeah, but still, John, they would still ooze blood,
Yeah, there should be some left in the body, correct.
Exactly. And there's none, John. Like I said, this is what makes life, this is what you and I do, John. This is what makes life fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, because we disagree on a lot, but the phenomenon is still there.
It's still there, exactly.
It's still happening, even though we disagree on the origin of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I was thinking about this week. You look at the UFO field, right? You've got cattle mutilations, which I view as evil, right? You also have abductions, which are traumatic and mostly evil because they keep coming back and you can't stop them. It's a form of slavery. But then you got crop circles, and that's considered in the UFO field, but they're
Mm.
kind of fun. So where the hell do crop circles get in the middle of this mix? You got crop circles with all this evil stuff, and then you got these men in black that are like awkward. They stumble around like androids.
Fred, that's a good question.
This
Fred,
whole field.
Gravity affects them differently than us, John.
Say what?
Fred, do the Men in Black exist?
What was that again, Shawn?
Do Men in Black exist?
Don't know.
You don't know?
Never seen one. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm so brand new to UFO, so I'm just sitting
Yeah.
back and enjoying this.
Yeah.
So,
But I
There's
was
a lot
thinking,
of
I was
stories.
thinking about that with all these people, all these aliens, that they say there's 176 races and all of that. Fred, I said, why don't you just go to get an asteroid, go to the next planet, get all the stuff you want. The only thing here that would be different is our DNA. That's the only thing that would be different to come here as opposed to the closest planet or moon to you.
You know what, John? One of the things, and I've talked to a couple of the guys from Mufon and Nick Redfern and that, and I asked him, I said, do you think when they abduct these people that there's only one group of beings that are doing it, but they're telling these people, they're planning in their mind that they were abducted by the Greys, they were abducted by the Nordics, they were abducted by the reptilians. And they plant that in their mind because, let's face it, people start getting together and they start talking and you start interviewing them. And all of a sudden, this one sees this one sees that, this one sees that. And it's so confusing. It'd be a perfect way to hide in plain sight. Speaking of hiding in plain sight, John, 2 years ago, we were down at the lake and all of a sudden over the trees, we saw these 3 white lights come up over the trees. And they went up about, 1,000 feet maybe, and they stopped. And the middle light kept pulsing, flashing. And it turned to its side, and then it started moving with the middle light flashing. There was no red lights, no green lights, no moving against the wind. Okay, silent. And later we found a guy down at the wastewater plant where I worked, and he would not go on the record, but he said, I saw it come out of the water.
Yeah.
Describing it was about 60 feet long, maybe 35, 40 feet wide, but he had seen it come out of the water. What a perfect place to hide, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
We've only explored 5% of the oceans and lakes, and
Right.
Perfect place to hide.
Well, remember in MUFON, we had that one field investigator. He was an attorney. He's the one that actually helped us do the 501c3 so that PA MUFON's a nonprofit. But he wrote that book on the orange orbs, and he identified 5 spots in the country. He went through all of the cases in MUFON that had orange orbs, and one of them was out of Lake Erie. One was over by Miami, one was on the other side by Tampa, and then there was one by Catalina Island off of Los Angeles, and I think the other one was a little further north up the California coast.
We saw one we witnessed an orb, I called it red, but it would fall in that category of color, right over Lake Erie, right down, 6 blocks from us here. And we watched it, and it wasn't moving a lot. But it was there. It was relatively small, and we're watching it, and then it faded out. And I said, "Oh, it's gone." And then in a split second, it reappeared way down lower in a split second from here to here.
Yeah, I don't know why they categorize red or orange. I mean, I'm looking at Fred's hoodie there that he wears in his neighborhood, and it looks pink to me. Is that pink,
it's
Fred?
red. It's red.
See what I mean?
Because you're gay, John, okay? Because you're gay.
Kathleen, Fred, I have a question.
Pink, red,
Why do you think there's a lot of UFO activity up in Erie? Why do you think that?
The lake.
The lake.
I think the lake has something to do with it.
Okay.
And more people. We've had a really good summer with heat, quite a bit of rain, but people are outside and they're looking up, and there's no mountains or anything. It's a good location, but I think the lake has a lot to do with it.
So there is an underwater. Do you believe there's an underwater base that could be there?
There could be.
There could be. We don't know that for sure, but whether they're attracted over the water.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
let me
You
tell
know
you
what?
this.
You know what? You were talking about orbs. Tell them about the doorbell cam.
Oh, well, we had a case who sent us videos from their doorbell cam, and they were white orbs. There was no wind, and it was clear out. We could tell the weather was good, and these orbs moved in variety of directions. In the same video, one would come this way and go up and out. Another one would come from here and go up and out. And she wondered what they could be. And
bugs.
Tell her about
Bugs.
no, they were bugs. They moved very slowly, and you watched it the whole way. Bugs kind of flit by. I know what you're talking about, the bugs. They kind of flit by, but this was slow moving, and we watched it go out of sight. Slow moving, and we watched it go out of sight.
Was it pulsating?
With bugs.
Tell her about the house.
The house had a history. This one went more into the paranormal with the orbs and that, but the house had a history. It used to be a funeral home, and the people that lived there, one was a medium. She was a medium.
Yeah, she wasn't well done. She was a medium.
And the woman was wondering whether that had any residual, and it could have been related to that. She said she wasn't afraid, and it didn't bother her. She just found the video. She said it was 2 different nights and of the video, and she just wondered whether we knew what it was or could say what it might have been. So we have different categorizations that we label cases that we get, and one of them is 4 orbs, unknown other. And that would be the orbs or anything.
There's a lot of people think those orbs are spirits too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of them.
that's the way she was going because of the history of the house too.
Yeah.
But that's the category we put him in because we wouldn't know where else to put just orbs.
Going back a little bit to, you brought up underwater USOs, underwater submerged objects. In that article I was telling you about by Lou Elizondo when we started the show, towards the end, it's funny when you talk to all the people in this group now, they shy away when you talk about aliens from space. I haven't heard one of them say aliens, extraterrestrials, right? But what he says towards the end of this article, after he wants to destroy UFO investigators and organizations and all of that, he said you're going to find out that what this really is, these unidentified objects, are our neighbors. And he doesn't explain what that means. They're implying they're not from space. So, the only other thing I can think is, there's a whole bunch of theories on where these come from. You either have that hollow earth of a civilization that lives subterranean under the ground, or you got a group that lives under the ocean, like the Atlantis people that maybe they grew gills, maybe they were always amphibious, and maybe there's something under the ocean. Because when you think about it, Fred, you said only 5% of the ocean's been explored. Well, the only thing that we do is we have trade routes, right? If you're going from Chile, from Brazil to Africa, you go a straight route. You're not going all the way down here. Nobody is in that area around Antarctica. There's no trade routes. There's no ships. There's no flights. Who knows what's under there? You go where the plane routes are and the ship routes are, and that's the only place you go.
John, you know about the Piri Reis map?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if the other 2 people here don't know about them, Piri Reis map is a map that was made in the 16th century, the early 17th century. And what it shows the coastline of Africa, the coastline of South America, and the coastline of Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is, it's an aerial view because it's shown from above, and there hasn't been ice on the Arctic 10,000 years ago. There was no ice there.
Huh.
So
but they can make maps from ships from going around. It doesn't have to
not
be
aerial,
flying.
not an aerial view, John. Not an aerial view. They're looking down. And if you look at this map, it looks like a satellite photograph.
Yeah.
What's the name of the map?
Perry Reese. He was a
P-I-R-I-R-E-I-S, I believe it is.
P-I-R-I-R-E-I-S, Perry
Yes,
Reese. He
Yeah,
was a Turkish captain,
yeah.
but he said he drew the map, or however he got it, it was made from older maps from other people in other countries, and they compiled it into this one. But there's a lot of people who don't believe, and I'm one of them, that these ice ages lasted for 100,000, however long they lasted, 10,000 years. There's a lot of people who believe that these things are actually fairly rapid. That when you have this climate change, which is natural, the temperatures rise, and then you have ice ages follow. But these things are fairly quick. They don't take like this. The scientists trying to tell you now that the ice age was there for whatever 20,000, 30,000 years. No, it was probably there for 500-600 years. And that
Well,
was
see,
it.
John, I'm going to believe the guys that have those degrees
I'm
in
not.
science, and
I'm not, because they have an agenda. They absolutely have an agenda. One is to get their grant money, and two is always to prove that creation's not true. That's the science. When you look at historical science, not medical science that helps people today, historical science, their goal is always to prove the earth is older than the Bible says, and that creation is not true. That is job one for them.
it is older than the Bible says, John.
Well, I don't think so.
Come on,
I think
John.
it's 6,000 years
Holy
old.
cow.
I think
David
it's
Hope has a
here's
question. What are your
Walter
thoughts
White,
on
John.
an alternate universe, Fred and Kathleen?
An
alternative universe. Well, you said there's other dimensions, right?
Yeah, I think there are, but again, I'm just going on what I've heard. I have no experience with it. And another thing is time travel. We've heard people say that they believe that UFOs are time travelers. Well, there's a problem with time travel.
What's
And
that?
the problem is that you can't have any contact with whatever you're going to visit, because you could change the timeline. Like, for example, if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, you can't do that, because then you wouldn't exist to go back and kill your grandfather.
Or
true.
it creates a split, and there's two futures then. And these are these alternate universes
It could
where
be.
you're alive with your grandfather, but then you're no longer alive, and that whole line was cut out, and it's a different future.
Yeah.
That James Krug, James Krug.
Yes.
Yeah, he was on the show, and that's what he said. Is about the time travel. It's possible, but it creates two paths then.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's Michio Kaku. He says there's 11 dimensions,
Dimensions.
right? But then they try to tell you that, like, our universe, like, let's figure a balloon, there are other universes all around it. Like, there's a bunch of, like, you go to a birthday party, you got all these balloons. Each one of them is a universe too. I mean, some of the things that the physicists come out with is just, I guess that's quantum physics, and they can make up anything they want and say it could be.
It's theoretical, John. They're
It could be.
theories. And they're, what's that old saying? We're going to throw these up against the wall and see which one sticks.
Yeah. Fred, one thing I got an issue with is, when you talk about all these aliens visiting Earth, right? You look at what COVID just did, right? You get this virus, and you got, I don't know how many millions of people died around the world. But, and remember War of the Worlds, which was a cool book. The way we killed the Martians was bacteria and viruses,
Yeah.
Once
we didn't kill them. They just contracted them. And once they got here to Earth, they were exposed to them.
they were
had
exposed.
no,
So my question is, and really, if you look at this scientifically, if you got all these aliens coming here, they first of all, they probably wouldn't look like, so many of them have 2 arms, 2 legs. They look too human in appearance, but their world would have a whole different set of bacteria and viruses. Their physiology would be different. How do they come here like they do? And some of them are seen in some spacesuits and helmets, and others are just walking around aliens. how do they survive here? It's something that to me doesn't make a lot of sense. How do they survive with all of the germs and viruses on Earth?
Well, John, the Greys, okay, and you're very familiar with them.
So is Shawn, his beard.
These beings, they have no genitals. They have no anal opening.
Mm-hmm.
How can they reproduce?
How do you know? Are you that close to one?
I'm just saying from the
people's
the
description.
descriptions of them.
Yeah.
Okay?
They said there wasn't. Maybe
No.
they had. Maybe that was a
thing
suit.
Is, the thing is, they might be biological probes. They might be biological robots, which means the beings who sent them don't care whether we get them or not. It's not going to tell us anything about them. They're simply they're simply running program.
That's a good point, Fred, because then what you're saying is the aliens that come here are more androids doing a job.
Yeah.
Because, and I've said that too, is that if you got to make this long trek, and who knows how long it takes, are they really going to go through 10 generations on a ship? And just look at this country. You go through 10 generations and your great grandkids don't believe in what you believed in. So they're going to get here and not want to cooperate, right? So, but if you're sending a robot android type thing that's programmed, then they come here for a mission and leave. And then the bacteria and viruses don't bother them,
That don't affect them. Exactly.
Yeah. That's a good answer, Fred. I didn't think you were that smart.
Oh, wow. Your earphones are too tight, John.
They are. It's bothering my one ear over here. It's getting all red.
So Shawn and Jen, can you see how we work really well together? Because we have different viewpoints, but we're able to put them together and come up with something that we both agree on.
Yeah, well, one minute I pray for him, the next minute we're in Erie and I want to push him into traffic.
Oh my!
Well, that explains a lot, John.
It does.
So, where could somebody get a hold of you, Fred and Kathleen? How can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can get a hold of us through John.
Yeah. No, but if they want it,
if you want to
give them my email.
Yeah, go ahead, Kath.
By email is probably the best way. MTNEST, like empty nest, 78 at AOL.com. We're old school. We're still on.
AOL still exists.
Yes, it does.
And Yahoo.
Yeah, it's been a
Definitely.
Well, let me ask you something else, Fred. They talk about all of these crashes, right? So you got Roswell, you got a bunch of them. I think in my one book, UFOs over PA, or no, the case for UFOs, we documented like 33 separate crashes over the years, right? So in none of these cases did the aliens come back to retrieve the craft or the bodies. They let us have them. How is that possible?
Because if they're biological probes and robots, they don't care.
But don't they realize that's going to give us some back engineering and advance us to leave that stuff behind? The Marines always say you leave no one behind. So if you go into Havana and they capture a bunch, you're just going to leave it? I guess we left all our stuff in Afghanistan, right? We left it all there,
Maybe they wanted us to have it.
Yeah,
as a way to help us advance.
As a way to help us without actually hands-on.
Yeah, but what about the bodies, though? To me, it's like I find it hard to believe that all of those cases where there were bodies that they didn't immediately, have the mothership is in contact with these smaller craft. One goes down, they don't send there was that famous case on Lake Erie. Remember when it was frozen? And there was the Coast Guard reported it. There was a UFO on the ice, and they could hear the ice breaking as it kind of penetrated the ice on Lake Erie, and there was something underneath that they were retrieving. I don't know if you remember that case. I did a show on Close Encounters out of Canada with that, Discovery Science.
I vaguely, John, I heard it a long time ago.
But it would seem to me they would have to be close enough to send another craft in to retrieve those bodies. We're not picking them up in 10 minutes. years ago. We're not getting there for the next day.
Biological probes, so what?
So what? I mean,
They're not human.
if
They're
our
not living
if
sentient
our
beings.
probes on Mars, if our robots stop working, we don't send somebody out to fix them.
That's right.
You know, we just
Yeah, but they know life on Mars. I mean, they know they're here. Apparently, they don't have a prime directive not to interfere with more primitive life forms. Because then you would be interfering by leaving us the bodies and the ships.
well, unless they're the ones that jumped us ahead and they're just keeping an eye on things.
So it's like Grandpa giving us a little extra candy and stuff, like I do with my grandkids.
Trick or treat.
Yeah, trick or treat, John.
Trick or treat, yeah. Well, we're not going to get to it, which is fine. But I got a whole bunch of stuff here on Halloween. We'll have to do it in a different show. Talking about
I just
Halloween.
watched a thing on the Travel Channel about the history of Halloween. Now, fascinating, just fascinating, John.
Well, it's the Irish that brought it over, but that'll be a different.
Hey, I'm a full-blooded Irishman, so thank
That's
all the candy you got as a kid right here, buddy.
That's it. Now let me ask you: with the abduction team, has there been any changes in what you're seeing? When I started with Mufon in '98, I mean, you heard about all these abductions. There were all the famous cases. There were abduction cases called in all the time. Is there any slowdown in abductions, or how about the whole fetus thing where women would have the fetus taken in the first trimester? Has any of that changed? Like they're changing their MO, or they've moved on? They don't have to get the women pregnant anymore?
As far as slowing down, we haven't been in it since 19, so I'm not sure whether it's gone down since then.
Okay.
But we were in it from 16 to 19. I think that's what I had told you. And I've got 4. I'm still a hard copy person.
You want to get one?
Yeah.
I'm still a hard copy person. So I used to print them out so I could refer to them on the printer, used up a lot of ink and paper.
Yeah.
I've got 4 2-inch binders of cases from those 3 years that we were on the team. And so slow down. As far as during our time, no. But the fetus, we only had one case where a woman described being taken, abducted again, and being handed her baby to turn over to another being. And but we only had one case like that. I just read that one last night, looking it over again.
You ever wonder about anybody breaking into your house to take those binders of that information, like government people or anything?
No.
John, I'm an 8th degree black belt. Somebody breaks into this house, they're in trouble.
But I tell you, when we did that Bucks County case, and the airport there sent me the discs with the radar. And I sent them off to be read, and and then Mufon sent it back to me from Colorado, and we had the radar of an object with no transponder. The first thing I thought about is, once they know I have those discs, somebody's going to break in when I'm away on vacation, and that stuff's going to disappear. Because I thought that was a huge. I mean, I had real evidence there of matching up to a UFO with no transponder near the airport in Doylestown.
John, your paranoia is showing.
A little bit, yeah.
Well,
my favorite saying was "Trust no one."
Trust no one.
They're just up in a closet, but I asked.
Now they know. Everybody knows.
Yeah. Well, they'd find him anyway.
Yeah.
But I asked George about it, but he hasn't gotten back to me. I asked him what he wanted me to do with it. I mean, I could certainly shred them. I don't know whether they have them on record. I don't know what the ER team. They never told me what to do with them. So I've got the.
They make a lot of those public, right, where people can go on and see the short version of the case without the long version, right? Is that still public? It used to be public.
You have to be investigator.
Okay, when I was there, and I always complained about that, is that you make these cases, there's the short version of 2 lines,
right, I know,
and there's the long version. They would make the short version available to the public to come look at the last 20 cases, and then you have all these talk shows and stuff, stealing all that stuff and making a talk show out of it.
I
And
don't think that's available now, but
I don't think it should be either.
there's a lot of cases that are available, but with no names and stuff that you can read about, bigger cases, you know, that have been in the news anyway. But I don't think you can read all of these.
No.
I'm going to look into that.
Well, I'll tell you something that happened a couple of years ago. Jen, remember you had Richard Lang on the show once, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Richard's my publisher, and he was the Star Team guy and all of that. And he's my webmaster for my site. But down in Virginia, where he was, or he is still now, the state director made a DVD. She took like all the best cases from MUFON and put them in a DVD, right? And she didn't ask for permission. And then she had Lang go run off like 100 copies of them, and she was going to sell it at the Virginia MUFON conferences, right? And headquarters found out about it, and they told her, you got to destroy all of those, that you're not, you can't put all of that out there, because a lot of those cases had the people's names, numbers, all of that stuff, you know? And you know, and her husband is a board member at MUFON too.
I think he would know better.
Yeah, you would think, but yeah, that's what she did. So,
well,
hey, John, we're getting near the end here.
Yeah,
I want to have Kathi tell you about this one case of a woman who swears a UFO was following her.
Yes.
Like we said, we go in as a skeptic, so we try and eliminate anything it could be. So we're reading this case, and she's telling us that she was in her car. It was dark out, and she's going to the store, and this bright light was up in the sky. She says it was brighter than any star, and it was following her the whole way. It was following as she's driving in the car. She would stop at a light, and it stopped. When she started going again, it started going. She pulled into the parking lot and sat there for a while, and it just hovered there.
Like Jupiter.
Or Venus.
Yeah, one of them.
We looked it up and decided it was Venus.
Yeah.
But when she came back out, there it was, but it was on the other side as she was going home, going the opposite way.
Right.
And
well, have you ever looked at Venus while you're driving your car and it gives the impression it's moving with you because you're passing trees? You're passing trees and it's passing trees, you know?
Doesn't the moon do that?
Yeah, any object that's stationary is going to give you that same appearance, you know?
So, I mean, it's easy to be fooled, though.
It really
If
is.
you don't know what you're looking at up there, it just shows you it's easy to be fooled.
We were on the beach one night, and all of a sudden, this bright white light just went boom, and it's moving towards us. And I looked at Kathi and go, "Well, I hope you got clean underwear on." I says, "Because I think we're going to be abducted." And here we watch it for a little while, and finally, it made a slight turn, and then we could see the red and green lights on the wings.
But coming
straight at us.
all we saw was the.
So it's easy.
bright
It's
light.
very easy to get fooled. Very
But
easy.
what do you think about the whole abduction thing of taking people against their will, coming back whenever it wants to, and you can't stop them? And you know, and then women talking about fetuses and lost pregnancies. I mean, how is that a good thing? That Ray Hernandez of that free group, I got in a big argument with him. He said it's a good thing to be abducted. It changes your worldview. I told him, take your grandkids, put them up for abduction, see if it's better than public school. You know, I said, how is that good? That's what I told him.
Yeah.
Right? How is it good? To me, it's very evil what goes on. It's a form of slavery, actually.
And can you imagine waking up and there's these three beings standing at the end of your bed?
What would you do?
Batman.
What would you do?
Yeah. Well, we're going to leave it at that, guys. But I want to thank you, Kath.
Thank you very much for letting us do this.
Thank you. Thank you for having us,
Fred,
buddy.
You call upon Jesus and those three things leave, and I'll leave you with that in your Geritol. See ya.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
I'll see you.
Take care.
Thanks for being on.
Okay.
Take your Geritol.
Geritol.
Oh.
That was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know if we were going to have enough material for 2 hours. I thought we got an hour, and we got 2 hours out of it. So
yeah, we have 10
I
minutes.
get along good with them. I disagree with their no God thing. I absolutely believe in God, but it is what it is. I've converted a number of people in the field, though. I just got to tell you that I've got a number of people now who are seeing things my way that this alien thing is not. It is the most malevolent thing there is. Now,
Yeah, that's how I feel.
whether they're interdimensional, malevolent beings, or they're demonic or whatever, there ain't nothing good to this. There is nothing good about it. You know.
That's what I believe in too. Because I don't know. I don't even want to go there
I'm
because it's.
I'm confused. I'm not confused. Some of the guests that we bring on, right? I'm like totally lost. So I sit
Yeah.
back and I try to understand what they're saying. And they were decent guests, and they were mentioning names that I never heard of, books
Yeah.
that I've
You
never
have to
heard
be in.
of.
You have to be in the UFO field. You could get a PhD in ufology. There is so much information. As a matter of fact, it's the second most looked up thing on the internet is UFOs.
Oh,
And there's
oh
so
well,
many stories, and a lot of them are made up, and they're just not true.
well.
I think a lot of it's made up. I
I
mean,
agree, it is. Well,
I
if you
mean,
just think about it, Jen, if you look at all the different scenarios of they're from space, they're interdimensional, they're us from the
mhm,
future, they're from under the ocean, they're demonic, they're this, they're that. I put it in one of my books. It's like 9 different versions. We're in a computer program like the Matrix. So okay, only one of them is going to be true. So that means
mhm.
like 90% of all the stories are not true. They're not true because all of that stuff conflicts with itself. It
I
can't
just want to
all
know how many
can't all be true.
people are on medication
Uh,
that says that they see these things. I just,
well, you know what's funny? Joe Rogan years ago, and I wrote an article on this for Mufon. He said that when he had his podcast, and I'm going back to probably 2015.
mhm,
He said that people with abductions and this whole alien thing are on drugs, or they're hallucinating, or they're dreaming. And,
mhm,
at the time I said, Joe, you should stick with the UFC and not UFOs. Now, as UFOs get more popular and this group comes out with Elizondo and Tom DeLonge and all of that,
mhm.
Joe Rogan completely changes his view because he's got these people on his show now, and now he's a believer in UFOs and aliens. So, I think some of it is for ratings and like coast to coast. I mean, they'll say the most outrageous things on that show, but it
I
was
know.
interesting how Joe Rogan completely switched and now he's a UFO believer because he gets good ratings on it.
Well, I believe in UFOs. I just don't know if
Well,
I
they're
believe
there.
in
There's
all
no doubt.
these people that see these entities that have these strange obscure names that like Ashtar, and
Yeah,
it's like a
yeah,
fairy tale stuff that
the
like a
yeah,
contactee
sci-fi
move.
movie.
Yeah, the
yeah.
contactee movement in the 50s. There's a lot of it.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
and anytime somebody talks about Venus, how can they
yeah,
be
it's
from
like
Venus? It's sulfuric acid.
Venus, if you will. It's
Yeah,
like
I mean, come on, they can't be from Venus. you know.
I mean, I
Thank you
don't.
for the compliment, Sebastian. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
Thank
thanks,
Thank you.
you,
Sebastian. Yeah,
thank
it was a
you.
good discussion, but the thing is, it is real. Is something is going on. The people see
Oh
what they
yes,
see,
definitely.
and the UFO is real, but what's the origin of it? And that has never been explained. And I lean more and more to the interdimensional and shape shifting. That same thing that could be a Bigfoot one day or alien the next day could be the UFO in the sky. It's a shapeshifter or it materializes energy and it can only stay there for so long because it takes so much, power and energy to manifest that.
Yeah, and I would like to do a show specifically on that. There's the encounters over the White House in the what was it, the 40s?
52.
52.
Yeah.
I'd like to do a show on that because what were they? I mean,
Well, there's
tons
video,
of
there's
people
video
saw
out
them.
there.
Yeah, so many people saw it, but what were they? I mean,
Yeah, there were nine of them moving over the White House
yeah.
in July of '52, and of course, Blue Book. I don't want to ruin your show. Blue Book said it was the reflection of streetlights. It's not.
Nah.
you could look at the video of them moving across the
Yeah,
sky.
it wasn't that.
At a certain angle, you're going to lose those lights. They're going to disappear if they're like heated versions or
There
something.
wasn't.
You know.
It was. I mean, maybe they thought there was, but
Oh,
to me, it looked like.
And that's why, with this new group saying that the naval scientists should conduct the UFO investigations and tell us what it is. Well, isn't that what they did with Blue Book? And it was all BS, is what it was. It was blue
Yeah.
BS.
I really liked that show on the was it the History Channel?
Oh, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, I
Oh,
wish they wouldn't have canceled it because I thought it was really
I agree.
good.
I bought the DVDs off the History Channel. I love that show. It was.
Yes.
They changed the storylines, but it still made a good story out of it. They didn't follow the original cases, But I
Yeah,
thought
it was a
great.
good story.
I just watched it a
liked
couple months ago. I watched the 20 episodes. It was really good.
Yeah, maybe
And
I'll watch
we're
it
going to
again.
have Alan Hynek's son at Philadelphia in Bucks County in
Oh
May.
wow.
So we're going to ask him all those questions about the show, why they cancel it, why
Yeah,
did they
definitely.
change the storylines? But that's Hollywood. Even with Hangar One, we would give them the case file, and then all of a sudden they're showing some different stuff that wasn't in it. It's saying some things that weren't in the case file, but
Yeah.
they have to make it entertaining.
Yeah, that's what they have to do.
And that's what is what they do.
Speaking of entertaining, I hope we have a good show next week, and I get a
Who
hold
do we
of some
got?
guests. We haven't had anybody yet. I haven't been able to do any of that lately. I've been really busy getting the house
Being
in order.
grandma. You're being
And
grandma.
being grandma.
Well,
It's fun being grandma.
do something with the ghost line because I'm not on next week.
Okay,
Okay.
definitely.
I'm going through. Yeah,
You're gonna
so
have
don't-
to let us know when you're on, John. So
Yeah, that's don't do aliens next week. Is what I'm saying.
no, we won't do it. We'll
I
save
can't
the
be-
aliens for you.
Yeah, I'm
We'll save
flying
all
next
the
week.
demonic things for
That's
you.
it. Aliens and demons. I'm going to make a TV series, Aliens and Demons.
There you go. That'll
There
be
you go.
fun.
It would be. I got a lot of great ideas for that too.
I know you do. You do. Well, we're gonna call it a night. But thank you so much for joining us tonight on Chasing Prophecy. And make sure if you think you'd be a great guest, drop us a line, direct message Shawn or myself, or even John Venturi, and see if you'd like to be on the show. So until then, you guys have a great night.
Good night, everyone.